Hey guys, how you holding up? Yeah, I didn't come up with that joke myself, but, felt like since I had it, I may as well. Just gonna read a few more comments that I've been getting on this Harry Potter video that's, even, like now, at least, 5 years since I posted this, it still gets, 2 or 3 comments a week. Let's take a look at these. When Harry first encounters Ginny, she has absolutely no idea what he looks like. Wait a minute. When Harry encounters Ginny, Ginny doesn't know what Harry looks like? Was Ginny not looking at him when Harry saw her? How can you not know what someone looks like when you encounter them? Unless you're blind, I guess. Well, Ginny's not blind, so we know that it's not that, so I don't understand this first part. But the second she finds out who Harry is, she keeps staring at him. No, there's nothing in the book about Ginny staring at Harry the first time he meets her. I've checked that part of the book over, and there's definitely no mention of that. And gets tongue-tied around him and blushes like crazy. I don't know about blushing. She feels uneasy around him, a little bit awkward sometimes, because, she deeply admires him. So yes, I will give them that, it's not exactly the choice of words that I would use, but the basic gist of what they're saying, that she feels uneasy and a little bit nervous around him. Yes, that is true. So, it was love at first sight, right? Nope. Because this only started happening after Ginny found out what Harry's name was. Wait, so she first met Harry and she was like, oh, he's just a normal sort of guy, and then she found out he was called Harry, and she's like, oh wow, he's called Harry, he must be maybe... I think what they must mean by that is she didn't know he was Harry Potter when she first met him, and then when she finds out that he's Harry Potter, she's like, oh wow, I've just met somebody I deeply admire. But, doesn't that make sense? If you don't realise that a person that you've met is someone that you've always deeply admired, you just think, oh, that's just a normal, complete stranger. You wouldn't think anything of it, and then you find out later that you've met somebody that you deeply admire and you didn't realise it at the time, you'd be kind of excited, wouldn't you? So, I don't see a problem with this. Prior to that, she was absolutely fine in his presence. It's a very short period of time between Ginny meeting Harry and actually finding out that he was Harry Potter. But again, there's no mention in the book of her being perfectly fine in his presence. She's just sort of mentioned once, I think, and that's it. There's no mention of her really doing anything. It is made crystal clear in the first interaction that Ginny is one of the people that grew up on the stories about Harry Potter and fell in love with the persona, not the real person. Well, she grew up on the stories of what Harry had done by making, you-know-who disappear. But it's a true story. It's something that the real person, Harry Potter, did play a part in. So I don't really know how that's not falling in love with the real person, if it's something that the real person actually did. Now, you can argue that she may have grown out of that phase, but it is made abundantly clear that it began as hero worshipping of a person she'd never met. Well, she grew to admire Harry before she met him, but she also escalated that admiration after she met him. It's not to do with any kind of rumour or myth about Harry that he did something greater than he actually achieved. He's not Gilderoy Lockhart. Nobody's made up any kind of stories about something great he's achieved. The only story about him is something that he actually did, which is defeating you-know-who as a baby. It's not something he really knew anything about at the time, or even remembers, but it is definitely something that he did, and it is definitely true within the Harry Potter universe. So the admiration that she's grown to have for Harry over the years is definitely based on something real. It's just, something that she just grew to admire him before she actually met him. But there's nothing wrong with that, as long as it's, based on something that's real. Yes, she totally didn't send him a besodden Valentine's poem that was read to Harry by a dwarf. I think this is an attempt at sarcasm, that they're pointing out the fact that Harry was sent to Valentine in the second book by a dwarf. Yeah, she did do that, as a kind of way of anonymously sort of expressing her love for him. I don't see a problem with that. This after a year in which she and Harry hadn't exchanged more than a handful of words and hadn't spent much time at all together. Well, surely that's all the more reason to send him a Valentine then. Express your love in a different way if you're a bit too shy or a bit too intimidated around him to do it verbally, to his face. It's interesting they put haven't and then put not immediately. haven't is short for have not. And despite haven't not seen Harry for close to a year, September 1992 and summer of 1993, when Harry came to stay at the Burrow, her first reaction to walking in on seeing Harry at the breakfast table was to run off speechless and blushing like mad. They hadn't exchanged a single word together at this point. Yes, she's a little bit uneasy and a little bit intimidating, a little bit shy around him when he's around at that very sort of young age, because she has a lot of admiration for him. I'm not entirely sure what is the issue here. What's wrong with being slightly intimidated by someone that you admire? That's a perfectly normal human trait for somebody of that age. She's only 11. Ginny then entered Hogwarts, and in the lead up to February 14th had absolutely zero conversation with Harry. Yep, you said that already. Just repeating yourself at this point. And yet she sent him a Valentine. Yeah, again, you said that already. As said before, for more reason to send him a Valentine. If you're too shy and a little bit uneasy around him to express your feelings, verbally to his face, send him a Valentine on Valentine's Day. I mean, she had the sense to wait till Valentine's Day to do something like that. She didn't just send him a love letter randomly at some other time of year. She had the sense to think, okay, this won't seem as sort of weird or creepy if I actually send it on Valentine's Day. So that's what she did. So I really don't see an issue here. Totally not a fangirl thing, totally an organic and mutual love. Again, at this point it was not mutual love, it was clearly just sort of one-sided. Harry doesn't really sort of think anything more of Ginny at this point. And I think we, as the reader, when we're reading Chamber of Secrets at this point, I think we are supposed to think that this is just some silly schoolgirl crush that she'll grow out of, and we're led further down that path, I think, with her maturing a little bit and becoming a bit more confident around Harry, being Goblet of Fire, and then being told in Order of the Phoenix that she's going out with somebody else. Right up until Half-Blood Prince, where obviously Harry starts developing feelings for Ginny, we are definitely led to believe that she had this sort of silly crush on Harry when she was younger, and now she's grown out of that. I thought that's actually something that made it feel much more organic and much more earned to me, that it's alluded to in kind of a silly sort of, oh, this probably doesn't mean anything kind of way in the early books. And then it comes back later on when they've matured a little bit. I thought that was quite clever myself. This person obviously took it a very different way and took it to mean something completely different. My guess is that they have never been on the receiving end of a crush in their lives, and that they actually don't know what it is like to receive that kind of affection. And I have had that experience, not so much when I was Harry's age in Chamber of Secrets, but I have had that experience later in life. It is kind of an interesting kind of mix of emotions that you get from it. It's kind of, on the one hand, a little bit sort of strange, a little bit sort of annoying that they're doing these kinds of things and thinking, oh, stop being silly, get on with what you're doing. On the other hand, it's kind of a sort of strange sort of ego boost, and you're almost sort of tempted to pursue it yourself, just, you're sort of thinking, oh, this is an opportunity, but it's really not. It's just kind of silly sort of human emotions that don't really mean anything. But, a story like this, sort of developing relationship of Harry and Ginny over time, has sort of led me to believe that maybe over time, these kinds of silly crushes actually can genuinely mature into actual organic feelings. So that's something that I really like about the relationship of Harry and Ginny, and it is sort of like showing that these silly crushes that you have at a young age can actually mature into something real. Ginny only fell in love with Harry due to his fame. Again, nothing about that in the book at all. I don't know where they're getting that from. And yet, she didn't really stand up for him much. Like, say, when the school called him attention-seeking liar and Ron turned his back on him during fourth year. Right, so I'm not entirely sure what you're suggesting Ginny should have done in either of those situations, but I actually talk in the video about a time when Ginny actually did stand up for Harry when she was even younger than those two examples you've given there. Now, I don't know, are they saying, oh, well, she stood up for him at one time, but she never stood up for him at all after that? I don't know, maybe that's because it didn't go particularly well for her that one time she stood up for Harry, and she sort of figured, I won't be doing that again. Or perhaps because she's developed a bit more respect for Harry over the years, she sort of thought to herself, well, Harry can, fend for himself. He doesn't need me. She's attempting to move on at this point. When Jenny first met Harry at King's Cross, she didn't care about him one bit. She just stood quietly by her family, but once the twins revealed who Harry was, she had an immediate reaction. "Oh, Mum, can I go on the train and see him? Mum, please?" Aside from not the bit where they say she doesn't care about him one bit, this is all true to the books. She does sort of see Harry and not realise who he is at that point. And then when she finds out that she's met somebody that she greatly admired, she becomes excited. To me, that makes sense. You know, if you find out that you've met your idol or somebody that you greatly admired, you would be excited. It's only natural to react that way. Weird how she didn't care about him one bit until she found out he was Harry Potter, isn't it? Weird. I don't know about weird, but it's not true. There's nothing about that in the books, about her not caring about Harry until she found out who he was. Again, it's only a very short, like maybe page and a half in between Ginny meeting Harry for the first time and actually finding out who he is. So somehow, after having met Harry only once, having not exchanged a single word with him, she developed a crush on him. I would argue she actually developed a crush on him before she met him because of all the things she's heard about him. I mean, keep in mind, he's the famous Harry Potter, so he is someone that she would have heard things about before she actually met him. And in neither version did she care one bit about him before learning his name. Again, I don't know where you're getting this from, this whole thing about she didn't care one bit about him. Yeah, in one sentence you're saying, you know, she developed a crush on him before she met him, and in another paragraph you're saying she doesn't care about him until she's found out his name. So she knew all about him, but she didn't know his name? She knew a lot about him to develop a crush on him without knowing his name. Again, I don't know where you're getting this from, that she didn't know his name. No, I'm just going to check this part of the book that they're talking about, just to be sure. So either Fred or George says, "Hey Mum, guess what? Guess who we just met on the train?" Harry leaned back quickly so they couldn't see him looking. "You know that black-haired boy who was near us in the train? Know who he is?" "Who?" "Harry Potter." Harry heard the little girl's voice. "Oh Mum, can I go see him on the train? Can I go and see him? Oh Mum, oh please." Right, so she does know his name. He says the name Harry Potter, and that immediately means something to her. So I don't know where you're getting this from, that she didn't know his name and only developed a crush after she found it out or something. Do they mean the fact that he's famous is important? Is that what they mean by saying his name? It's like, I think it is a sort of way that they talk about in marketing. You know, the name Coca-Cola, the name Disney. You know, people see that sort of brand or title on something, they think, oh, it must be good, or it must be in high regard, or something. I don't know. The name Harry Potter is significant to her in some way because, well, yeah, it would be. The name Harry Potter means he's the person that she's admired for a while. So, again, does this not make sense to you, mate? Before she found out who he was, she didn't care about him. Heck, talking to him wasn't even important. I think it was important. It's just something she was a bit scared to do. You know, she's a little bit shy and she's a little bit intimidated by him at this point. She'd met him, she knew he was Harry Potter, and that was enough to develop a crush. Well, finding out who he was and what he'd accomplished in life and hearing, that he'd made you-know-who disappear, that was the thing that made her develop a crush. Maybe that's still a little bit of a primitive thing, it's not really enough of a reason to fall in love with someone, but I would argue she didn't really fall in love with Harry before she met him, she just developed an admiration for him before she met him. And remember, she did not develop the crush before knowing he was famous Harry Potter. Well, she developed a crush on the famous Harry Potter. You can't develop a crush on someone before knowing who they are. Before she knew his name, he was just another face in the crowd. Before she knew that the person she'd met at King's Cross was Harry Potter, yes, he was just another random person getting on the train. That's perfectly normal. You're suggesting she should have developed a crush on a complete stranger? That's even more creepy. Heck, Tom Riddle's memory makes it clear Ginny thinks Harry's fame is very important, as he mentions that she's worried that famous Harry Potter would never return her feelings. I think that's a fairly sort of normal kind of thing to think at that kind of age, when you're first developing a crush for someone and you've actually met them for the first time and you've seen them, over the course of a year or so. When you have a crush on someone, you always do feel a little bit of anxiety anytime you see them and then you're wondering about, the next time you're going to see them, are things going to be the same? That's a normal thing to be sort of thinking in the first sort of year or so of developing well, maybe not a year, but the first few months at least of developing a crush on someone. It depends, I think, on the kind of age you are and how frequently you see them. I mean, Ginny was only 11, and she probably didn't see Harry that much at school because she was in a different year. That's kind of a sort of normal thing, I think, at this sort of stage of having a crush on someone and developing a relationship with someone, of not being sure how they feel about you in return. Despite Harry giving her zero indication he'll ever return her feelings and having exchanged almost no words with him ever, she sends him a Valentine. Obsessed? Check. Fangirl? Check. Sending him a Valentine on Valentine's Day, does that mean she's obsessed? I mean, that's literally the only indication she gives to Harry during the year at Hogwarts that she has feeling for him, I think, or is developing a crush or something. So, I don't really see how that's obsessed. As for fangirl, there may be a little bit of element of fangirl to it at that point. There's other people that have made this sort of argument that it's a silly schoolgirl crush. I try to sort of explain by using the example of the way she stands up to Harry in Flourish and Blots, that it's not a silly schoolgirl crush at this point. A lot of people have just sort of come back to me and said that that's all the more evidence that it's a silly schoolgirl crush. But the way I read that scene, it really didn't seem like that way to me. I honestly could not imagine someone with a silly schoolgirl crush standing up to someone that was older than them, larger than them, and certainly a girl standing up to a boy. Because not to try and be sexist here, but it's just a basic fact that the male people in general are a little bit stronger than females of a similar age or a similar size. But that's quite a sort of scary situation to step into, I think, for her, and the fact that she's willing to do that at such a young age and not long after having first met Harry properly for the first time. I think that was quite a brave thing for her to do. So to me, that is not her fangirling or being showing signs of a silly schoolgirl crush. The Valentine is a little bit maybe, but the fact that she waited till Valentine's Day to do it, and the fact that that's the only real indication during the year that she had those kinds of feelings, that doesn't seem particularly obsessive to me. Heck, the entire reason why Diary Voldemort, I assume they mean Tom Riddle, is so obsessed with Harry is because Ginny wrote about Harry in the diary on a regular basis and told Tom Riddle all about Harry. I don't think that's the reason Tom Riddle's interested in Harry. The diary Tom Riddle knows what the real Tom Riddle went on to become and how he was defeated. Because he tells Harry in the Chamber of Secrets that he is Lord Voldemort. It's never made exactly clear exactly how a diary from 50 years ago, or a memory in a diary from 50 years ago, can know these things. I guess it is possible, maybe, that Ginny told Tom Riddle about what Harry did, but I imagine that's because, Riddle asked her to say what had happened so he could get a proper, clear picture of how his future self was defeated. And then he can put a plan together of maybe how to do something about that. But I think the reason why Voldemort is interested in Harry is because he's found out, through Ginny possibly, that baby Harry defeated his future self. And I don't think that's got anything to do with Ginny having a crush on Harry. I really don't see how that's relevant to the question of if Ginny and Harry are really in love or not. Ginny spent the summer hiding from Harry while he stayed at the Burrow. We know this because the book follows Harry's point of view, and every single interaction they have at the Burrow is of Ginny either hiding from Harry or not speaking when Harry's present. Yes, they don't speak, and she's a little bit intimidated by Harry when he's at the Burrow because, this is the first time she's properly met him, and she's admired him for quite a while. They exchange a single line of dialogue when Harry asks, "Oh, are you starting at Hogwarts this year?" And this wasn't even at the Burrow, but in Diagon Alley. No, that was at the Burrow. And obviously Ginny does not respond verbally, she nods. Yeah, again, she's intimidated by him, and she's a little bit nervous around him because, she's had a lot of admiration for him for a while, and she's kind of shy. I'm not seeing an issue here. In fact, the book makes it abundantly clear Ginny hasn't spoken a single word in front of Harry until Harry and the Weasleys ran into Malfoy in Diagon Alley. Leave him alone, he didn't want all that, said Ginny. It was the first time she'd spoken to Harry. Yeah, I talk about this in the video, mate. There's quite a bit more to this scene that I talk about in the video, but they decided they weren't going to talk about that. They were just going to bring up that first specific bit of line, so they're picking the part of the scene that they think helps their argument. and they've conveniently left out everything else. The power of editing, where you can just cut and choose what bits you want. It's like the way they put specific bits of statements from movie reviews on posters. Those were in fact the only words Ginny spoke in front of Harry until right before Riddle's memory had her go into the Chamber of Secrets to die, where the following exchange happened. "I've got something to tell you," Ginny mumbled, definitely not looking at Harry. She was not speaking to Harry, she was speaking to the group: Harry, Ron, Percy. Percy wasn't there. Percy shows up a little bit later in this scene after Ginny's got, well, actually, he scares Ginny off later on in this scene, but at this point Percy's not there. So throughout all of this, Ginny had yet to speak a single word to Harry. She didn't respond verbally when Harry asked her about going to Hogwarts, she merely nodded. And Harry had spoken to her only once. Yep, this is all true, mate. I don't understand why this is a problem, though. As I've already said, she's kind of in awe of Harry, she's intimidated, and she's a little bit shy at this point. It's just sort of the early stages of, crush, I suppose, it is at this point, which later then develops into love. So yeah, that's a perfectly normal sort of reaction to someone that you have a lot of admiration for, and you also kind of have romantic feelings for at the same time. It's a perfectly normal way to behave at that kind of age. And yeah, she sent him a Valentine. Keep coming back to this bloody Valentine, don't you? I don't quite understand what this obsession is with the fact that she sent him a Valentine on Valentine's Day. I'm guessing this person never received a Valentine and they're a little bit jealous or something. This is probably like what they keep telling themselves. Oh, I've never received a Valentine. Yeah, but if I ever did receive a Valentine, it'd be really creepy and really weird. It's clearly just somebody, the only person who sends a Valentine is somebody that's completely obsessed. So yeah, they presumably never received a Valentine and probably never had the courage to send one themselves. It cannot be true love if you don't know someone. You can't fall in love with someone without knowing them. I agree with that. Luckily, though, Ginny does know Harry, so we're okay in that department. She knew only his public image. Since she hadn't spoken to him even once, she couldn't possibly know him as a person. You can know a person without speaking to them. It might be more difficult to know a person without them speaking to you, but you don't have to speak to them to get to know them. If you're good enough at expressing and giving you an idea of who they are. If anything, really, I don't really know how you can get to know a person by speaking to them. They definitely would need to speak to you in order to get to know them. And again, she also got to know him before she met him because of all the things she'd heard about him. So that was like the main comment that I wanted to respond to. There's a few others, though, that we've got in here that I thought were kind of funny. Also, getting angry at subscribers and commenters is a great way to lose subs. I'm not really too bothered about losing subs, if I'm honest. If people want to unsubscribe from me or just choose not to subscribe in the first place because they don't like the way that I talk in the videos or interact with people in the comment section, that's entirely up to them. I'm not bothered. You may have noticed that I hide my subscriber count because, to be honest, how many subscribers I have is not important to me. God, are the fucking paragraphs necessary? Just reply to the comment you are trying to reply to, unless it's deleted, and stop being a know-it-all. Is this person suggesting that I just type out, using, a wall of text and never press the enter key at all? What's this person got against paragraphs? I assume what they mean by that is they don't like the fact that I type out a lot when I respond to people. If I've got a lot to say, there's nothing else I can do really. I've heard some people make the argument sometimes that if you've got a lot to say, you need to make a sort of separate video like I'm doing here. It's kind of a difficult thing to know, really. YouTube have now introduced, for quite a few years now, unlimited characters in the comments section. So, why not utilize that and, use the comment section to the best of its ability and, type out, properly thought out paragraphs and comments. To turn this into a more civilized discussion, I think, is the way to go. It was never something anybody questioned back when we were using forums. I don't see why it should be something that we don't do in the comment section on YouTube. Now, the comment section on YouTube is pretty shitty when it comes to developing threads of discussion with people, because a lot of the time you don't get alerts when people reply to you. And also, reading through threads of comments, you've got to keep clicking over and over. It's a little bit frustrating to keep track of who's replying to what. So maybe that's his issue here. It's very difficult to keep track of the discussion. But I think, if anything, not using paragraphs will make following the discussion even more difficult. As for being a know-it-all, well, I can't help it if I know stuff. Well, people are different. This is Harry Potter. You guys are arguing about the books already contain 8 books worth of paragraphs. It's actually 7 books. It's 8 films, but it's 7 books. We don't need you guys reciting lines all over again. You kind of do if, you're referring to a specific part of the book. So yeah, I don't understand what this person's problem is. It's the mentality of, oh, too long, didn't read. But if you've already read 7 Harry Potter books, and I assume you have if you're here at all, then I imagine you're probably okay with reading a few comments as well. When Harry met Ginny, Ginny was like 8 years old. She was 10, actually. And then Harry was 11, prob when they first met. Yes, Harry was 11, they've at least got that bit right. So it's also wrong how Harry dating a younger person than him. What, you're not allowed to date someone younger than you? Does everybody need to date someone exactly the same age or something? That's going to create a major problem for a lot of people, I think. I assume what they mean is like when you're the age of like 11 or 8, you shouldn't be dating someone like noticeably younger than you, because obviously like a 3-year age gap, which is not the age difference between Harry and Ginny, by the way. It's actually just 1 year. They're saying, that's kind of a big deal because, that's 3 years, that's like, about 25% of the time Harry's been alive. But obviously when you get to the age of about 18 or 20 or something, it's not such a big deal because it's a smaller sort of percentage of your life. But the thing is, Harry and Ginny weren't dating at that point, so it's kind of irrelevant. Many people think that Ginny spelled Harry into falling for her. I don't think anybody has theorised that Ginny used a spell on Harry to make him fall in love with her. There is this fan theory that Ginny used a love potion. I don't think it's very popular with the fans in general. I do like the sort of basis behind that theory because, Ginny is introduced to love potions at the start of Half-Blood Prince, and the way Harry develops feelings for Ginny, it does seem a little bit abrupt in the way that he just suddenly is like, oh my god, I think I like her. But that is the way love works sometimes. Harry even says he didn't know how or why he felt like he did towards Ginny. Does he say that? It's possible he does say that at some point in Half-Blood Prince. But yeah, when we first develop feelings for a person, we are a little bit in denial, and trying to sort of rationalise it or think to ourselves, why am I having these feelings suddenly, when I didn't have them before? I think Harry sort of says to himself, oh, well, it's because she's Ron's sister, I'm naturally protective of her because I sort of think of her as like a sister myself. But then over time he realises that was actually not true and he actually is developing genuine feelings of love for her. That's just the way love is sometimes. Harry shows Hermione more respect than he does anyone else. Does he? I'm pretty sure Harry respects pretty much everyone he meets. Fairly well anyway. I don't think he respects like Malfoy or Voldemort or Snape or something. Well, he respects Snape later on, I think, once he finds out what he was really up to. But yeah, I never got the impression that Harry had any more respect for Hermione than literally anyone else he knew. And when Hermione and Ron fell out, Harry sits there to comfort her. I wasn't sure what they were referring to here at first, but I think they're talking about when Ron first falls for Lavender Brown in their Half-Blood Prince. Harry's there to comfort Hermione because, she doesn't really have anyone else at that point. It's a very sort of tight group, the three of them. So if Ron's gone off with Lavender Brown, he kind of needs to be there for her. Doesn't mean he's in love with her. Hermione had never thought of Harry in that way. I assume by that way they mean, love. It's kind of way that people talk, oh yeah, I like them, but I don't like them in that way. They never let themselves. If they had let themselves feel that way, they could have had romantic feelings for each other. Okay, well, first of all, I don't think anybody lets themselves develop romantic feelings for a person. You just sort of do have romantic feelings for a person. You either have romantic feelings for a person or you don't. You don't allow yourself to have romantic feelings for a person. It's like saying I allowed myself to be 34 years old. It's not something I can really control. It's, I either am 34 years old or I'm not. You either have romantic feelings for a person or you don't. If they had let themselves feel that way, they could have had romantic feelings for each other. So if they'd allowed themselves to have romantic feelings for each other, they could have had romantic feelings for each other. It's a completely redundant statement they've just ended that comment with. Yeah, just that whole comment I find very confusing. Anyway, that's that, guys. I hope you enjoyed going through these comments and just trying to understand what some of these people are actually getting at.